Nice to meet you
Nice
guys.
to meet you.
Welcome. Thanks for getting up early Sunday and hanging with us.
Putting on a
Oh,
jacket too.
10 o'clock?
Daryl just woke up 5 minutes ago.
Well, I'm going to be I'm shooting one right after this,
Oh,
actually.
Nice.
Looking sharp. Look at this guy. This is beautiful. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our show / podcast.
You guys are actually late. So wait, which one's Darryl and which one's TK? Now I'm confused. I thought I was talking to the dude in the middle.
Who's in the middle?
Nope, that's Daryl on the left.
Daryl's on the
talking to you.
left. Oh, well, hey,
Hello.
Darryl. Sorry, I was literally thinking I was talking to the wrong guy the
You
whole
were
time.
talking to the wrong guy. That is actually, in fact, true. Depending on your perspective. Depending on your perspective, you could be right. You could be wrong.
No,
You're one and the same. It's the same show. As long as it's the same show, we're good.
Exactly.
It is
we're
this
good.
show. So what?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Are we're rolling, Daryl?
We
or what?
are rolling, baby.
Okay, sweet. I love it. Yeah, Bradley. So thanks for doing that. I've been listening to a few of your videos and great stuff. I remember. I think I saw one of your videos before Daryl mentioned it. I was like, this guy's on fire. And then all of a sudden, Daryl said, we've got a guest. And I'm like, who could it be? And I didn't expect it would be you. So that's
Big
awesome.
man reaching out. You don't ask, you don't find, you don't get the guest,
That's right.
Yeah.
That's it. You get the big
That's
names.
right.
Not to
good.
say I'm a big name. If you guys think I'm a big name, that's I'll take the
It's
compliment.
sad. No, we're actually very low level. So yeah, you're a big name, and we're happy to have you.
As far as I'm concerned, you are a big fish in a bigger pond, and
we'll get your pond bigger. We'll grow this.
We'll
channel.
grow
Yeah,
this
we'll
pond.
get you to that
We
next
aspire to be in your shoes, sir.
It seems like we have a similar format. I'm thinking maybe Daryl stole it from you, but
level. Maybe.
yeah.
That's
So
okay.
just going over the news, like it's things that we were already reading, that we were already following. Both Daryl and I are in the industry in different, different ways. And it was like, okay, well, why don't we just talk about the stuff we're already doing?
If you are a real estate nerd like I am, you will see many of us have the same format and talk about the same articles because there's only so many of them.
Yeah, that's how it goes. I mean, it was the same. Literally, the reason I started was the same reason you guys just described. Like, I'm looking at this news anyways, and I've got if I can create a platform to share it with people. I mean, it just allows you to reach more people quicker. Instead of telling it on one by one basis when I meet with a client to see a property, for example. Now we can actually reach new people and get the message out, and honestly, translate the news because it's quite confusing.
Well, and
to a lot of people. I mean,
there's a lot of baloney out there, and which we like to call out quite regularly. And what TK and I were just talking about before you jumped on is that I'm not a realtor, so we have a very different perspective than most people because, like you were saying, it's to kind of reach more people. But for me, it was to, spend some time out of boredom when COVID hit because I got stuck in my house.
Never does it for you.
Well, sure.
He's got that Toronto map behind him there. He's been studying real estate since the 70s.
See any lines though, other than the road lines? I gotta get like a red marker. You can fill in the spots.
If you look at a different map, you can see that one. It's not a very extensive map, but I'll show it to you one day. But actually, if you look close, there are some points of interest on that map, but you have to look really close because a lot of them wiped off because they were erasable marker, unfortunately. But anyways, what we like to do around here is very similar to what you like to do. We roll through some articles. What I like to do is I like to invite TK normally down a little journey of the previous week's real estate news. Sometimes headlines, we debunk or bunk on top of them, depending on the headline. So basically, I'm going to whip through and try and paint a picture, and you guys have carte blanche to cut me off anywhere along the way with whatever you want to talk about. It is a conversation. It is not an interview. Unless either of you have questions for me, I will get started. So,
all right.
Do it, boss.
I think we would be remiss not to discuss the COVID situation. So I have here, Ontario breaks another COVID-19 record as it adds more than 1,100 new cases. So we obviously...
What's COVID?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't really talked about this much. It was funny. I sent my buddy a text yesterday saying, there's no sports. The election's over. Like, what the hell do we have to talk about? Oh, yeah, COVID. Right? But like this thing's heating up. This thing's like the Toronto real estate market now.
Well, definitely. I
it.
mean, the numbers are there, right? So the numbers are growing, and obviously people are concerned. But I've found like the level of fear to just be waning more and more and more. You know, like I feel like more people are getting out. More people are saying like, I'm going to plan that vacation anyways. I'm going to go out and do it. I'm going to meet with my friends and family. I feel like that people are learning to live with COVID, and that's a good sign.
Yeah, we went out.
Oh, the beast though, right? Because look at Peel. So we just got an email. The real estate's in the room. We did get an email from Aria saying open houses are restricted to those not in stage red, which is now Peel. And in fact, today I saw in the news, Peel is not even allowed going outside your home. Like even 10 people bubbles are no longer allowed. So they're really ramping it
Ouch.
up.
Really?
The cases
Ouch.
in Peel are almost as high as Toronto, and I don't know the breakdown in the population. I would think it's what, a third, a fourth of the
3 or
population.
4 to
of
1.
Toronto.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So hold on. Where's Toronto at then? Is it are we in that same place?
It's still in orange.
Okay, because it's
They call
as a
it.
percentage.
They've color coded it because I think they wanted to make it look like they were doing something. So they made it look like all the colors of the rainbow. We got red, orange, yellow.
Quick, color a map, quick.
Wait till we're in
Let's
purple.
do something.
Yeah. But Bradley, what I
Map,
mean,
your
That's
Toronto
right.
map right there.
Hey, mate.
that's the government stance. What about the private citizens? Like what are the people in Peel region? What are they saying? The people that you know, are they all still like, man, I don't want to go out, so I'm going to stay in? Or they're like, oh, I guess I can't go out because of the government, even though I would.
Gotta ask the people, but I would presume that their government needs to step in because there's a lot of parties and stuff
Yeah, okay.
in Peel, and that's what's ramping up the numbers. And people don't like to talk about ethnicity, but I think it's a factor, and just the culture, right? Like if you're a culture of like kissing on the cheek and spending a lot of time with extended family, it's gonna
Italians,
speed things up. That's all.
trouble.
I mean, I think COVID is. I think we got it under control. I'm very optimistic about this whole COVID thing. I'm not as far as real estate goes. Now, obviously, I'm concerned about all the grandmas in the health units, but as real estate goes, I don't see it causing much of a problem. I think that the first wave, the psychological impact of the first wave, is going to have 10 times the impact we're going to see if we were to get a continued spike now. That's my thinking on it.
I agree. I think we just have to accept the health crisis and let the professionals deal with it and protect the vulnerable and everybody else. And there's a lot of people who can go on with business as
So
usual.
new COVID-19 measures take effect as Ontario shifts to new tiered system, which most people, from what I'm reading, don't seem to be huge fans of this new tiered system. Yeah, a lot of people are saying like, it looks like they just colored on some maps and, that's the basis of this whole thing. But listen, this thing is affecting, you'll see a little pattern here in the articles. Toronto real estate prices made a massive monthly drop while 905 gets a boost. And this is, of course, a byproduct of, I guess, the exodus to the exurbs, as you've talked about and we've talked about before. We have why the pandemic is pushing young tenants out of their tiny rentals in Toronto's core. This is not positive stuff. How the pandemic has turned downtown Toronto condos into challenging investments. I mean, they were pretty challenging as investments before, right? Unless you paid cash for that thing or 60%.
Like you bought it 5 years ago and the building took way longer than it was supposed to. Great investment.
I have somebody I know, a big developer, and he said something so profound. He said, the market made us geniuses, right?
Yeah.
And that's just it. Like
good markets make those type of investors.
Good timing, right? So we also have investors rush to get out of pre-built Toronto condo deals. It's not looking good.
That would be interesting. I'd like to know the stats on that. Yeah, I'd like to know exactly how many of those people are doing that, because we're still seeing a high demand for pre-construction. I've got an assignment client right now, believe it or not, someone who's looking in the core, right? Like that's their goal, is to get a deal. And it's not easy to find a deal. There's not a bunch of people dumping assignments left, right, and center in good buildings that are going to be built or completed in the next year or so.
I've seen a lot of news that they are dumping the tiny units. So depending on what your client's looking for, if they're looking for under 500 square feet, they're giving away everything for those. They're giving parking spots. And I'm not going to play around the pre-construction.
This is not pre-construction. This is
Are you talking developers?
No,
or
this is
assignments, Bradley?
assignments.
Mostly assignments, but I've seen developers giving these away too. I've seen
Oh, yeah.
commissions of 10% to realtors that can bring to some pre-construction projects. Yeah.
Wow.
10%.
Assignments is just a product of a failing, like they know they're going to have to close on it. They're going to resell it. And those units are selling 100, 150 below where they were
20%
back
less.
in March, April.
Yeah.
So like just a product of like, let's just get rid of it. Let's cut my losses. Then I don't have to pay the land transfer and then deal with it again later anyways.
Have you noticed?
I don't think it's any surprise.
No, not the smaller units. My guy's actually looking for a 2+ den or
But
3 bedrooms, so that's probably why.
have you noticed in the new launches?
Also depends on where you're located because it's really the downtown old Toronto regions that are impacted. If we look in the suburbs, condos are doing actually very good, and they look
Great.
more like low-rise units than they do the tiny condos downtown.
Yeah. We have multiple offers left, right, and center, and anything that's half an hour out of the downtown core. People are lining up for it.
I think I've noticed a trend lately, and it could be just me that's noticed it, but I seem to notice on all these launches that like 2 and 3 bedrooms and larger units are getting released first now. Have you noticed that?
I'm not big into pre-construction
I don't
either,
play
so
around that.
Yeah, okay.
so I only get the emails, and when I have a client, I look into it and I do my research. So I don't know, but I did see a development for.
I feel like all the big units are being.
There was a new announcement this week, Darryl. It's a heritage site. Shoot, okay, it'll come to me in a second. But it said largely comprised of 1 bedrooms. That was the application.
Yeah, I mean,
So
if it's downtown.
somebody still feels like 1 bedrooms are. It was downtown, yeah. Somebody still feels like 1 bedrooms are going to be a hit.
Yeah, I think.
Selling them, whether they sell them or not, they're trying to. They got to sell these before they can start the construction, but the plans are in place, right? So now what? You got to sell them.
Yeah, this is.
The builder, if I were to be strategic as a builder, I'd be trying to delay the closing on these 2, 3, 4 years, just based on people know in that time frame you're going to have a rebound coming back into the city. I honestly think people know that, but nobody wants to say it because they want to talk about what everyone else is saying and that run. But I honestly think there's an underlying understanding that at the end of the day, you're going to have a 9/11 happen. People are going to run away from the city, but they're going to come back and they're going to be stronger than ever. I think that's what's going to take place. That combined with an overinflated freehold low-rise type units because of this craziness and people leaving. Like, what is the trend? What is it lining up for? I think I want to be going the opposite direction. I want to be swimming the other way. And I think that that's what's going to pay off down the road. So I think the builders know people know that. And so they're going to say, I've seen a lot of, like, just from where I've, what I've seen, I know in Vaughan, there's a lot of projects that are saying we're going to close in like 4 years, 5 years. See if we can delay it as long as we can, because that's where there's confidence with consumers right now.
Mm-hmm. And that's why those are selling out, is because the 4 or 5 year plan is okay. It's the 12-month plan that everyone.
I think it's because it's.
To mention, you override the risk of rent, right? Like you don't have to deal with the tenant and finding it.
It's investors. Investors are smart enough to know that, like, in 4 or 5 years, this thing is not what it looks like today. Like, these are long-term players, most of them, right?
I've even heard whisperings, okay, this is not official, that a lot of resale condos are starting to get a lot more activity in the past couple of weeks. So people who have been...
we've talked about that, and I think it's in certain areas. I think that's where you kind of see the picking up happening, but to get too excited about that kind of thing, because I don't know, I'd rather see what I'm most concerned about when it comes to this was the same reason why we were hopeful in April and everyone else was freaked out. I want to see a balance. I want to see the number of active units going off just as fast. Until that happens, you haven't really hit that bottom, but it's going to happen quick. It's going to happen in a matter of, you're going to have, as soon as the Treb stats get released, you almost need to look weekly. You need to be 2 weeks in, kind of like you guys are doing. You got to be on it. And then by the time that monthly comes around, I don't even think people are going to notice. What I think is going to happen before any of this condo revive takes place is you're going to see prices coming down in the winter, which is a very natural thing. But take last year's winter, for example, people don't know that can happen. It's like people have forgotten that when it gets cold, people stop buying real estate. And so
I feel like that too, yeah.
Yeah, combination. People are like, oh my God, like we're done. We're done for.
Yeah.
And then there's your assignment sales. You want to talk about assignment sales and discounts? That's where they come. Not the builders. I don't think the builders are going to reflex like that. But you're going to have resales and assignment sales just tripping out into the new year. And then come March, April, once you start to see, you'll start the thing is you're going to have a rebound in the low rise before you got a rebound in the detached, and sorry, in the condos, because they took a big hit, right? Really big hit. So year over year, they're gonna bounce quicker. They took a hit before the condos did, in my opinion, because condos were up 20%. Now they're back down to flat year over year.
Well, so before the
come a little bit later.
before the pandemic, housing was like not great. Low rise, detached, it was okay. Condos was going through the roof and crazy. They were diverging in opposite directions now. If you go back previous to that, it was the opposite of that, right? Houses were gangbusters and nobody really cared about condos. Right now, fast forward to now, and we're back in the opposite. Is there a time in space in Toronto where divergence becomes convergence, and we have like a regular real estate market? Like even I mean, in commercial and residential, like everything is going all over the place depending on the segment that you're in. So is that normal? Has it always been like that? Or is it normally that like things are just chugging along in one direction, up or down?
I think I've
I'd
seen
have to go back
glimmers
on
of
a
it.
map. Yeah, I'd have to go on a map to see that. I'd put it somewhere between 2010 to 2012. This is before my real estate days. But I remember seeing back in 2017 a real disconnect in the prices, this divergence as you're talking about in the low rise in the condos. But that had been playing out for 4 or 5 years at that point, which is why I was very much saying something's got to give. Like this is getting outrageous, right? The cost that you're buying per square foot for these low rise were just out of the ordinary. Not to say that low rise are going to come down, but that there's a catch up that can happen in the condo space. So that didn't take place until the psychological impact of 2017. Everyone freaked out and then kind of what you're saying, there's a flip. So I think it's just flipping again. So things like COVID put unnecessary pressure on one segment of the housing market, but overall they are following a similar pattern. It's just you've got one that's like a trampoline. One's going up, then the other comes down, up and down. The same spot.
So is this the result of just so many like disruptions coming simultaneously, like technology and health kind of whacking us simultaneously so that all of these sectors are being affected? Like, is it normal that, you know, all of these sectors are getting affected so differently in like the lowest point in immigration, you know, like everything's so crazy. How, like,
I think everything right now, like just I don't follow the stock market that closely, but I know right now, like this week was just absolutely insane and things were going in different directions. The housing market's going in different directions. Types of business. I talk to people who are best year ever, and then other people like struggling underwater. Like I think this is unprecedented times for all the different, you know, fields of our economy and stuff like that right now. So I don't think that anybody can say like, oh no, this is just, you know, this is just what happens when a pandemic happens. So for sure, these are unprecedented times. Nothing's normal. The dollar's up right now again. The U.S. election.
What?
So
What's
many
that?
things. The U.S. election. Yeah, it was just like competition between.
Did that happen
Yeah,
already?
all right. Yeah, it's done.
Oh,
It's
I
over.
missed it.
You
I
didn't hear about
missed it.
You missed
Shit.
the parade? Yeah, big parade.
That.
Yeah. Apparently.
So
Florida's
hold on
upset.
a sec. So what happens at some point in time? Does this thing converge again in either direction?
Eventually, freeholds are going to become out of reach.
If you're truly an investor, you don't want it to. Like the fluctuation is the magic, boys. Like this is where you get opportunities, right? If everything was to be steady, I mean, it's great long term, but I personally get excited when things are a little bit out of the ordinary. I mean, it's the reason podcasts like these can take off because people are looking for an explanation. And if you can get the proper explanation for what's going on, like the election is a perfect example. Okay, so if you look, the reason that the stock market is doing so well, in my opinion, is because everyone's listening to this narrative. It's a narrative being put out by stockbrokers, and like there's no. So if you look at before it, Trump, for example, would say stock market's going to crash since I'm not elected. Then you go to the pundits, and they're all saying, okay, well, what we could use is if we had a Senate that's Republican, but then what were they looking for? They were looking for a sweep. They wanted a sweep with Biden, but they didn't get it. They got a sweep in the Congress. But they couldn't get it on the Senate or whatever. I forget the tiers. But anyways, because of that happening, what they've done is they switched the narrative. They said, oh, now it's going to slow things down, which means more stability in the market. So you literally take whatever it's saying and you spin it to the perspective that's going to come out saying things are clean and, you know. But I think that that's behind all of that. There's actual activities that are happening. The reason the dollar is strong here is because the spending in the U.S. is going to go off the rails. That's why our dollar has gone up.
Which we're happy to be benefiting from. Keep on
If you
printing that
want
money.
local investing,
Biden.
yeah, but from an international perspective, it reduces the money flow, right? Because it costs more to invest here. Everything has an equal pull.
Well, right now, I think the dollar being in the position that is going to be good because we want to be able to have more buying power elsewhere. And I think right now, with the way the economy is going, and we're going to obviously talk about immigration today, I think that's a big thing. A lot of people no, okay, well, let's try it. A lot of people are like, the narrative that I'm hearing is everybody's saying, like, we don't have enough jobs, immigrants are bad. If we add more people and not more jobs, how are we going to be able to get our economy back on track? And I think that that's exactly what we need. Is we need more foreign people, more foreign investment, more foreign attention, and the higher the population and more businesses that are operating out of Canada internationally is going to offset any cost or any change in our dollar value, right? Because there's just going to be more things happening on the global stage. I know we have a lot of people now who are already doing that, like Canadians who are from other countries, but more of that attention actually brings more international money to the Canadian economy, right? Because, like, honestly, who am I going to be dealing with outside of Toronto, Ontario, right? Like, it's really like, I'm not running a business or anything like that. All these people who've got businesses and skills and international, like, I have clients who work from like all different types of parts in the world. Like, I meet them and they're like, no, my company's in, this one lady's in Japan, and another guy's in the UK, and it's like those connections were made because they immigrated to Canada, and that's how they're able to bring additional stimulation, which is great. That UK money, good exchange.
So what's happening now in the background, maybe in the foreground for some people, but in the background, what's happening is the city. This I think is a great way to boost the economy in a few places. We have, in the last few weeks, we have 3 different stories of the government pushing through permit applications for gigantic projects. One of them in Pickering, one of them in Cambridge, and one of them downtown Toronto. And I mean, we're talking multi-tower sites with townhouses and like recreation. Like, these are gigantic projects, like 50 acres and just crazy big projects, affordable housing and all that kind of stuff. Like, this will create a ton of jobs that aren't currently here. I mean, right now, builders can't keep up with the demands. Like, the labor pool isn't even there, right? And this is what I think they're hoping, is that they bring in like that renaissance of labor, right? Of actual physical labor mixed with, obviously high-tech computer skilled people. But like, we need people to build all this stuff. Right now we have, 124% more. What is the headline? Toronto condos completion rose 124% this summer. Like, the developers are not trying to slow down. I mean, this is being done. The 124% completions, those are sold, right?
So I talked to a concrete guy.
These are so, but that's the thing. Like, we are just keeping up with demand from a few years ago. Forget about current demand and soon to be coming down the pipe demand, right? Like, that's.
I talked to a guy, Darryl, yesterday, boots on the ground, big construction company, one of the biggest concrete form companies in the city. They do all the biggest projects. And he said they're charging 2 or 3 times their normal rate because they're so busy that all the developers are coming. And the developers are saying, well, instead of making $200 million on this high rise, I'll make $100 million. He's working on all the big sites downtown. And his rate, because this is what they used to charge and that was competitive. Well, now it's like, well, you want it. It's there's competition. So he said that it's 2 to 3 times the rate for the concrete to build these high rises, and the developers are going, no problem. When can you start? That's what
sure,
it's like
because
right
the increasing concrete,
these issues, right?
the increasing concrete is cheaper than the amount of interest you're going to pay waiting around for that guy to start, right? Or for another company to start.
But the reason the price is going up is because they don't.
Looking at a lot of different. We're looking at a lot of different things, right? Like, we started with immigration, and you guys are on the side that immigration is good, and I agree. I think a lot of people who don't like immigration, I feel them, because the reason everyone has their motivations, right? If you want real estate to do well, you want immigration. You want these people to come. They're going to stimulate the housing market. It's a lot of demand, a lot of demand. Our motivation is let's keep rents down. Let's not create that competition for the next few years of these like a huge influx of immigration. Look at the benefits that they've been experiencing. So I feel for everyone, because I think that there's different views to it. If we could keep our immigration numbers lower, we've been able to see during COVID that we continue to reach a level of success. Do we even need immigration? Is immigration something that we need in order to be successful?
Yeah, I mean, it's a
so I think
it's a lot of people. We can't even meet the demand of what we've currently been bringing in, right? Like now we're gonna go.
Yeah.
Bring pricing
Let's
down,
go 10 times more.
But keep in mind, if you are the type of person who wanted to be able to afford to get in the housing market, you aren't concerned about condos rising 20% year over year. Your goal is simply to get a house for you and your family, right? For them, this is a great thing. So to have something like immigration, that's absolutely going to stimulate the economy. And for people to say they're going to take jobs, they're going to bring jobs. I mean, you've got a lot of them who are coming to improve their economic position. I think it's like 60% or something was the number that they wanted to do that. But you got a lot of smart people, a lot of money that are going to come through and that are just being held back. And I think that issue protrudes through everything from your pre-construction issue to these issues with ramming down some of these projects that the province is stepping on these conservation authorities to say we're going to do it anyways. All of those things, there is an opposing view to those things. And I think if we just kind of jump over and say, well, this is great, we're creating jobs. Yeah, I mean, but there's a reason that those wetlands exist, right? There's a reason that we can't just do that. And if our ultimate goal was to create jobs, well, what happens when all of a sudden we've affected our drinking water? Like who's gonna pay for that? Because maybe the costs are, I think there needs to be proper assessments too. And it's just, again, back to the stock market. I think it's the same reason why having a competing interest at the table, having a slower process is what makes it great. If everyone was able to just, run things on either side at without any supervision, that be let's go too far left or too far right, we got ourselves a problem, right?
For sure. Yeah, those are all there for safety nets, and the rules have to be followed. There are some limitations, and there's also things that Darryl and I have talked about that it doesn't matter how much red tape they cut. It doesn't, like, there's still human beings involved. There's still people who need to sell land, to bring it to its highest and best use. There's still people who need to be able to be willing to push a project forward, even though there's very little money on the table. There's a ton of stuff that will create issues. So even though we do talk about immigration being good, and even though we do talk about it creating jobs, we also understand that it's going to cause a lot of problems, that there's going to be a lot of issues.
If our ultimate motivation is to get everybody into owning real estate, then having immigration come is going to be a failing plan. If our goal is to create jobs and stimulate the economy, which will allow people to create additional housing units to allow them to rent and to stay perpetual renters, which we think is a bad thing, but go to a place like New York City or London, like they're rental cities, and that is what Toronto is.
That's what I was just going to say.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but if
that we are looking at a point in time where the divergence comes, where people are leaning more towards being renters, where it's not frowned upon if you're going to rent. Like in New York, there was a point in time where it was like, I can't afford to buy here, but I really want to live here, right? And it's going to be it's already the same in Toronto, but that it's going to split even further. And there's going to be huge demand from investors to buy stuff because there's nowhere close to enough purpose-built rentals, which I'm sure we've all talked about in the past, right? So I mean, immigration, if used properly, which I think they're intending on trying. I mean, they've got this big green initiative for renewable energies, which we're going to need people to do all that kind of stuff for. We have huge advances in e-commerce where we need people for all that kind of stuff. And then all the other tech ideas that we don't even know about yet, right? That are all coming.
The other part to this equation is we're all Toronto people. Like we're all in the GTA. And so we're always looking at like, oh my gosh, our market, it's about 35% roughly come to Toronto, right? So you still have this huge number of people. Like you still have hundreds of thousands of people who will be going to other parts of Canada where they desperately need help. Like, I know right now Alberta's not doing great, but there was times where everybody was flocking to Alberta because they were building infrastructure and everything else too. The Maritimes, the same thing. BC's got its issues. There's so many different areas of Canada that are low density that we're kind of blind to. And I think the federal government, their mandate is to be looking as Canada as a whole. So there's lots of different sides. I'm glad Bradley brought that up, because we are very like hard, like immigration, woo, with our little signs and everything else like that. But there's plenty of negatives, and there's plenty of things that we have to figure out that we have not figured out yet, and that the plan doesn't account for, and that will cause us growing pains that every international city has to go through. Transit being one of them, traffic and commute times.
Can you even imagine what it would be like in Toronto? 400,000 people immigrating to Canada, of which, what did we say, like 60% end up in Toronto?
No,
hit that target, by the way.
It's a third.
That's a
whatever
target. I don't know. I've never really said that on my show, but I cannot see them doing that. I just can't.
I agree too, and also we have to look at political stuff.
But that's
too,
crazy.
Right? So right now, that's
a move. We're gonna say as many as we can. That's believable, but it's never gonna happen. I mean, we didn't hit our number last year because of COVID, and the number was.
We were probably on target, though. I mean, like, it did hit at the very beginning of the year.
60% this year.
Yeah, but it started in like February, the whole shutdown talk.
He's right. He's right, though. The number is totally 100%.
There's so many unknown factors.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to say we're going to get 400,000 next year. But when are we going to be open?
Right, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's good that it's a high number, in my opinion, but it's just a number. Here, let me throw one more wrench in this conversation as well.
Let's do it.
So this idea of investors, because a lot of my listeners, most of my listeners, are investors. They're interested in the real estate market, but they're interested in making money. And if you were to ask them, like, why would you invest in Toronto? First of all, most of them aren't. So the question is why? Why would you buy an investment in Toronto? And the reason is appreciation is just through the roof. That's the only reason. There's no cash flow coming out of Toronto. There's really not. The big boys are buying in these places that you're talking, like places like Alberta. Yeah, okay, fine. There's no appreciation there, but I'm not investing in Alberta for appreciation. Right. You're investing in cash flow, right? You're investing in these other cities, these up and coming cities. So just as quick as they jump into Toronto when you've got high appreciation in value, they're going to jump over to places like Ottawa, right? They're going to get out of here as fast as they can if that appreciation is better in a neighboring city. So I think that's a dangerous game for Toronto to play. Just be kind of running on the idea if we can get appreciation, because there's going to come a point where it doesn't work anymore, and we need to have more depth than that.
But I think a lot of the people that are investors in the downtown Toronto market are not concerned with cash flow as much as they're concerned with getting cash out of somewhere else. And it's a fairly safe investment if they're not worried about the cash flow, right?
Sure.
But that's really a great deal of those people.
I find a lot of people that come I don't know about you guys, but a lot of the listeners to my show, they come from the perspective of like Toronto. Like, I honestly believe Toronto is the best city in the world. I'll stand by that. I honestly believe that. I just think, like, if you're going to talk about investment, I'm going to invest in Toronto. You're doing it different. You're not doing it in the same way that the big boys are doing it. You're doing it because you like Toronto. And if you want to live in Toronto, that's great. But if you're going to compete in buying pre-construction, I talked to many people who have lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in these markets, not just this year, but investing in people who are at best sketchy because there's a guaranteed appreciation and then getting caught. Now they overall make more money, but there's a high risk to small investors if you're not careful. So I think people need to be smart. I think they need to be a little bit smarter and not look at Toronto as an investment, but look at it as maybe a level of security, being a really good city. There's a lot of good things Toronto has to offer, and naturally the appreciation will come back. I do believe that. But I think depending on who you talk to, there is better investment vehicles than the city itself if you're looking to make money.
I've met a lot of investor profiles. Like, I think there's as many different profiles as there are investors. Like, everyone just kind of got their own expectations, their own risk tolerance, they've got their own preference. Some people, it's about convenience, right? So I agree that there's a ton of investors who are going to be agreeing with you as far as what Toronto has to offer. But then there's just a bunch of other people who just look, I just want to be I have a guy who just bought a house on his street. That made the most sense to him, in Scarborough. He was like, that's, I can see it, like there's my property, and like I talked to him about, and I said, well, we could have done this, could have done that. He bought it privately off his neighbor. And he's like, no, that's what I wanted. And I was like, okay, like there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like there's really no way to,
for buying over renting majority of the time. So don't get me wrong. Like, I do believe if you're going to be purchasing a property, if you're going to be moving into the city, especially a time like now, depending on what kind of product you're looking for, it's as good a time as ever to buy. Interest rates are ultra low. get a 5-year fixed, and then what happens if interest rates go up? Then you can sell it later. Like, I mean, you might as well pay down your mortgage. But when it comes to generating wealth, a lot of people have left the city a long time ago. I don't think COVID has changed anything. I think the changes that we've experienced from COVID have been people deciding they don't want to live downtown anymore, not investors. They had already made up their mind a couple of years ago. Back when you were talking about condos weren't getting positive cash flow. There's no money in that unless you're flipping contracts.
Where do people go, Bradley? Where are some of the cities that people are investing in Ontario?
Like big portfolios in Ontario, I'd say there's been a big push through Hamilton. It's now stretching out until like St. Catharines, Niagara. So it's going further and further. Windsor, I know a lot of the circles I'm in, investors are out in Windsor. Any of the areas that you can get high cash flow, a lot of them are buying up these properties, doing renovation and refinancing them and rotating the money. And so they're getting funding from banks, like they're legitimate flip opportunities where you can keep that, hold it. And I see all the way, like me and my audience, we're looking a lot up in Simcoe, a really Midland area, but there's people moving all the way up to Thunder Bay and across the country. I mean, look at the East Coast has done so well. So there's no limit, right? The moment you get into those circles, there's no limit to where
we like to, on the weekends, we like to go take a drive up north or east or west. We go like an hour and a half. Yesterday, we went to 2 places. We started off in, what was it called again? Anyways, it was like just north of Beaverton, east of Aurelia. It was really, there was not much going on there. So we ended up south of there in Port Perry. And Port Perry is like really cute. And what we keep noticing is, no, it's like a really cute downtown, and like it's got really nice houses, and it's got everything that you really need in Port Perry. And there's a lot of people actually. But all these little towns that we've been going to, it's like we end up going there. And we're like, I end up on the Realtor.ca app, and it's like, wow, like
not cheap.
Well, not even that it's not cheap. It's so much cheaper than here. It's crazy, and what you can get like on the water compared to just a normal, bungalow here in Toronto is unbelievable. But like, every time I go there, I'm like, I could live here. Which I'm telling you, even a year ago, I would not even entertain the thought, right? Because it'd be too far from everything. But now everything is in my house. It's crazy. Sure. It's really crazy that things are going this way. And even though we're seeing an exodus of the cities, which we're seeing a lot of people willing to move. I think, like, weren't all these people willing to move before the pandemic, and they're just not being replaced by people coming in willing to take those spaces?
How I look at it is, people were already leaving the city. They were already right sizing or downsizing.
Yeah, like Hamilton's booming.
But COVID just sped it up like 10
years. Barrie first was like a great place for your investors, I'm sure, and your audience. Moved to Hamilton,
like one of the top performing cities last
right.
year. Forget
right,
COVID.
right.
Yeah.
But and moved to Hamilton, and like moved to wherever, St. Catharines, and that's just what happens, right? People start moving, and investors start going where people are moving, and this is just the normal cycle. And what'll happen is, all these people coming in, they don't think the same way of downtown as the people that are currently living downtown through this mess, right? They're like, oh, thank God we're not where we were yesterday. Let's go downtown.
Yeah, this is things are they're gonna see. The irony is it just goes to show, like, if supply was the issue downtown Toronto, but maybe it wasn't supply, maybe it was demand too. Because the demand is now gone, and clearly we have an abundance, specifically in the condo space, of supply. So maybe supply wasn't the issue, but now we look at these outskirt communities, and now they've got a supply crisis. So what? We start building out there, or maybe we need to better manage.
But
maybe it's just, again, an inflow.
But what we have downtown, it's like if a gigantic apartment owner or a gigantic short-term renter company that had thousands upon thousands of units went bankrupt. Right? Like, that's what's happening. Just thousands of rental units that were short-term came on the market. It's the most unnatural thing that they're even in existence to begin with. But then the fact that they all go bust at the same time, you have to have, like, what if that was eliminated from the market and all those people were just either normal renters or normal owners?
So what Realosophy did was they looked at where all the rental income, where all the rental inventory was coming from, and 55% is actually coming from previously long-term rental units. So the short-term rentals aren't the issue. They're actually saying that what it looks like is that a lot of the inventories come from places where people just figured, my job is not doing so well, so I'm going to move back home. My rent was so high, I'm going to vacate this unit and go into something else. Maybe they're going to leave the city. Maybe they're going to decide to go into the freehold, but they don't have a very strong conclusion here. But what they're saying is that it's not just the Airbnbs that are causing the problem. In fact, furnished rentals and previously short-term rental listed properties were actually not the biggest percentage, right? So I think people are just moving, and there's different reasons for everybody to get out, and of course, it's created a huge oversupply. But we're 5% ahead in rentals than we were at the end of the third quarter of 2019. So like the demand is still there. Like there's still people moving. And
yeah,
getting
that's
into
what I was
spaces.
thinking. That contradicts what you were saying before. Like, well, we're signing up more leases than ever. We just have more supply. So what's the difference?
Exactly. That's what's causing the prices to come down.
Okay. I
Right?
don't.
So where are all these people coming from?
I don't think we've seen Airbnb yet. Honestly, guys, I think wait until January. Wait until next month and in January and February when a lot of them are trying to sell these units. I'll bet you maybe not rent them because they know I'm not going to be. I don't want to do a long-term rental. The pressure cooker is turned on them on figuring out what they're going to do because they can't rent these things as of January. So they're trying to list them, which is going to fail, or they got to go in the long-term market, or they're going to dump the condos. These are things that are going to put further downward pressure on condos. So they're still there. There's still more in there.
And the next highest category is previously owner occupied. So people who are saying, I don't want to live in my condo anymore. I'm going to buy a freehold and rent out my condo space because I know the market's not doing well. So I want to just rent it out and keep it as an investment.
Right. That makes sense. How many people are there?
We factor in
how many of them are
in the rental. Like there's going to be a huge supply shortage of rentals very soon. So
under
having them do that is actually wise. It would be a wise move to keep those. Why would you sell your condo when the prices are down momentarily? That doesn't make sense.
Doesn't.
And you can get a house with a super ridiculously low mortgage. Way more house.
Movement, by the way, that upsizing from a condo. Think of the level of competition that's happening in that space. You've got first-time homebuyers that are overshooting the condos. They're like, I don't need a condo. I'm just going to go right into low rise. And why would I want a condo anyways? Even though there's a deal, I don't want to be in the city, nor do I need to be.
I don't need to be.
So they're all competing in the low-rise space. As soon as that starts to change back over, you're going to – I mean, I think things will tick back up later in the year, next year in condos. Quite quickly.
If you cannot, if you don't have to go into the city, like why in the world would you pick a condo over a bungalow with a yard further away? Like I don't understand it at all. I personally don't understand it at all.
Yeah, you can't eat at your favorite restaurant.
Why did you understand your favorite club 6 months ago or a year ago? Like why?
I wouldn't live down there before, right?
That's
like
you.
You're not the right person to ask.
No.
Like why? What changed?
Listen,
all that? Like I
you can't.
I don't know if anything did. I think it just sped it up. I think this was just an ongoing trend. That's
maybe the rest
quickly, and everyone's just.
A lot of people like going out to bars and restaurants when they live downtown, and that's big. I mean, like Cineplex, the movies, some certain entertainment like that. I could see that was super accelerated. Restaurants, like. It makes no sense at all. I mean, it makes sense, but that just got so obliterated. And if you were sitting in 385 luxurious square feet at Charles and Jarvis, then, you know, you're going out every day to a park, to something downtown, to somewhere. You're not sitting in that thing. Like I was reading an article today about a guy, he had to leave to Hamilton because he had to set up his office in his bed. Because all he had was like a bachelor, 300 and whatever square feet. There's no room for an office, right? But so for like $400 less, he got double the space in Hamilton. That makes sense. People aren't stupid. And there's only going to be so many businesses that require you to have to come in all the time now. But
yeah, I got a friend who's
the big
contemplating.
Debate. Do people come back?
Yeah,
that's the debate.
He's contemplating it right now. Is like, is my business gonna ask me to come back in the future? Because right now they're saying no.
Right.
Right. So trying to find a
point
place
where
that's
rates to be a renter in Toronto is pretty much as in Mississauga, like within 100, 200 bucks. So if you on the tail end of COVID are left with the decision, do I want to rent in Mississauga or in Toronto? Where are you going to go? And I think because of this like jump outwards, I do think there's going to be people that see the benefit of being in the city, and that'll be just the start of it. Then once the wave starts again, and not COVID wave, the wave of coming into the city again, people are going to say it's actually more affordable for me just to buy a condo.
Right.
So here's a
My
question for
favorite
Brad.
bar.
So you've got a condo downtown, you own it right now. You were getting $2,500 a month. Your tenants vacated the unit during COVID. You've tried to rent it out for 25, 24, 23, 22, whatever. What's your advice?
First of all, I
wanna-
wouldn't have owned a condo in that scenario, but if I did
That's
right
too easy.
now, I would to sell it. I would get creative with my financing. I'd be looking to invest outside the city with the money if I can. Depends on how tight I am, because there's a lot of people who bought at 5% down back in April who are underwater now.
Yeah, you have no mortgage. You have no mortgage.
Underwater.
No mortgage. You've owned this condo since it was built in 2001.
Oh, that's
Paid it off.
easy. Yeah, come on.
I'm just trying to come up with it. So do I rent it out
I'd
and
take my
take the
money
loss?
and run probably.
Or do I
'cause
get
could
out?
pull a lot off
Here.
this year.
While we're talking about being creative with stuff,
Yeah.
which there's not much creativity, and if you throw 100% ownership with no mortgage into it, it's really not so hard to figure out a million different things to do. But check this out. Company turns small offices into private gyms in Toronto, and you can rent them by the hour. Now we're
Yeah, fully
talking,
booked.
right? We had a clothing store open up a restaurant in the middle of the restaurant because they're allowed. But this is the kind of cool stuff. Hold on a sec. Let's go out on a high note. High demand for housing in GTA will continue beyond COVID-19, says Trep. So we have new creativity being created by this whole craziness, and high demand in housing coming down the pipe. Let's finish the conversation on some high notes.
All right.
Kind of close with the last thing I was saying though. As I've thought this through, if I had a condo in cash right now, knowing that the condos are where they are and the potential for the increase that you're probably going to see next year, there might be a bit more down, but I think you've got generally more up. I would actually probably keep that condo, and I would rebuy it and use the money, because you don't need to sell it. The only reason you'd sell it is to get that extra, 30, 40% that you need to break even. So in that scenario, yeah. So I just to kind of recap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To
To
close
find a
that thought,
tenant.
I don't think I would even dump it. I don't think there's a world where you're best to dump a condo right now.
Okay. So find a tenant at the best market rent you could find.
A lower market rent, it just means that you're refinancing less off the condo, right? You can take less money because you need to make sure you're breaking even. And I'd be locking them into at least a year, and then just hope to God that they don't do craziness with the rental rates and tell you got to stick with that forever.
Thanks. Sorry.
CEO.
Just refresh. What's the next topic? Sorry,
We're just talking about.
Well, Trev announced it. You had a video on it actually. Trev was talking about demand for housing not being decreased over the next after COVID, right?
Continuing.
So I'm seeing that too. Darryl, let's do a new survey, Darryl. Can we please do another survey?
It's your survey. Yeah, go ahead.
Know. All right, just put up your hand if any of your friends right now or in the past 12 months have been homeless. Okay. It's 100% of people that I know in this conversation know people who need a place to live.
And currently, 100% of the surveys have come back at 100% of the participants.
100%. So people need a place to live. That's it. That's not going to change. So COVID, downtown, out of town.
Homelessness, like on the street?
No, like, you know what I mean? I'm talking about just like, and I'm being a little facetious here, but what I mean is people are always looking for housing. No one just accepts and says one day, I'm going to decide not to own, I'm not going to rent, and I'm going to couch surf, right? That's not what people do. People say to themselves, I want a house, I want a roof over my head. It's shelter, food and shelter, basic human instincts, right? We're born with it. So this is never going to change. People are going to continue to search for the best possible housing that they can afford, that meets their lifestyle, that makes them feel good, that makes them feel at home, that makes them feel at ease. That's what we do, and then we will continue that hunt until the day we die. Until we get to a place where you say you're going to take me out in a box, you will continue that until forever. That's how it works. So it's going to be hard for us to ever say the only times in the past, and I've said this a few times on the show, that the market's ever dipped is when you took away buyers' capabilities of getting financing. When interest rates spike, when foreign buyers tax have come in, and then like Bradley was talking about the psychological effect of those types of things, you take away the money and the stress tests and all these type of things, and people start saying, "Ooh, maybe I can't get the mortgage that I want, so I'm not willing to buy this house for this much cost." Right? I'm getting less than what I think I should be getting, and then that starts to make changes in the market. But as long as there's an open door and interest rates are low, people are just going to they're going to keep upgrading. That's what people do. Get ready for
anytime soon. The pull factors into the city of Toronto are unbelievable. Like when I talk to people who are overseas, they're just like, you guys don't even know. You're literally paradise on earth. You guys don't realize what you've got there. Like we are the least, if not, I think we are considered the least in the G8 countries, corrupt country. We've got unbelievable standard of living here. I mean, there's a reason our immigration numbers are so high. I mean, to the point where we can say we want 400,000. Last year, we had 300,000, 350 or whatever the number was. That was the highest in North America.
Yeah.
And we're pushing higher. Like our goals, like,
sure.
You know what I mean? Like
we've got the third best brand or something.
Precedent.
Third best brand in the world, Canada. Yeah.
Too. Yeah.
U.S. News just was like
giving us in North America. Where would you go? Like, where else would you go?
Hawaii.
We were talking about that yesterday. We were talking about Hawaii yesterday, me and the family, while we were driving. We're like, let's get out of here.
That's it. Toronto or Hawaii. If I'm not in Hawaii, okay, then I'm in Toronto for sure. Nowhere else. And I'm joking.
Just don't sell your Toronto units when you go, all right?
Yeah, I'm just joking. Toronto for sure.
The numbers are crazy. When I think of homelessness, there is a legitimate homelessness issue in our city. I think our priority should be to get people into housing. I think that's a government's responsibility, not the responsibility of small landlords. But I do agree, if you can afford it in the GTA, forget just Toronto, but in the GTA, you're going to aim to rent something, right? You're going to try and rent or buy something. Ultimately, the majority of people surveyed want to own. I mean, we can see that. But a lot of this push has been happening. Like you've got people we're members of. TK, you said you're an agent, right? Or you're licensed?
Yep. Toronto
We're part of Toronto board or whatever board. We're part of Ontario Real Estate Association.
We got it.
Yeah, and they go on to talk about how our big concern is affordability. Yet the proposals that they often put forward are only demand pressures. Most of these are demand pressures. And so like when we're going to help the first-time home buyer get it, all you're going to do is boost the price. You're incentivizing things like we want certain regions, for example, that will be given preferential tax treatment. Really? Is that how you're going to uplift an area? You're going to end up pushing all the people out of that area, and it's a huge opportunity for developers. So all of these moves that are sent to the game plan is we're trying to stimulate. We're trying to get people moving, which is going to somehow create jobs and allow people to get into housing, is what's pushing the prices higher and higher, which if you're invested is a fantastic thing. But if we're actually concerned with housing and getting people with a roof over their head, it's not doing that. It's really not.
So we can agree that the government's got a tough job ahead of them. That this is not an easy solution, and like there's not just like hey, this is what you got to do and it's going to work, and that all major cities in the world have got to struggle with this type of dilemma. And I think there's some Scandinavian countries and stuff like that have got some pretty good systems in place, but I feel like Toronto is we're going to be talking about this for a long time.
And I've brought it up a couple of weeks in a row. I mean, I still don't have my pre-consultation meeting with the city, and we're going on like 8 or 9 weeks now. And it was supposed to take 5 days to get a date, and it's taken 9 weeks to just get a date. And so, we've talked about it. I don't know if you've heard Bradley us talk about it, but I've put in just a request for a meeting with the city, and they're so understaffed. While we have 10% unemployment, the city is understaffed to a point where they can't get to applications for new housing.
Hear you say that, it doesn't surprise me. You look at any level, look at things like people who are looking for power of sale deals. Those are backlog like crazy. Landlord tenant board backlog like crazy. All of these government setup. But you know what's ironic is it actually kind of helps enforce strong real estate market, because the longer it takes for these things to happen, everything stays put. Because imagine what would happen if you had a landlord tenant board that was able to immediately evict 50,000 Ontarians, right? Or you had a power of sales that took off. I think there's a reason, like the slowness of the system in some ways actually saves us. Now,
Helping
from the
us,
perspective of developing, I mean, I think like look at the costs associated with the times of
It's
waiting. Like, so on that side, I
crazy.
do think more needs to be done. And I do agree. I could see the benefit of streamlining or fast tracking a lot of these developments. I just do think we would be a bit ignorant to ignore that there is going to be consequences to doing that. We just got to weigh them out. What does it make sense or not?
Sure. But the fact remains that because of this and many other factors that you're talking about, there's zero chance that supply is going to go up in relation to demand.
well, these projects that
Perspective,
they're
I guess
pushing
you could
through.
go by housing type and what term, but long term, I'd say in all housing types, I would agree with that. We
You
can't keep
can't.
up. 400,000 immigrants. Where do you think they're going? Half of them going to Ontario, and probably half of that are coming to the GTA. So unless we can develop 100,000 units in the next between now and the next 3 years when they're ready to buy, it's not
No,
happening.
and what's going to happen is the
So we're gonna
divide.
stick them at a bunch of mobile homes. Like, is that the plan here?
Well, we're gonna wind it. We're gonna wind down right now with our special guest's recommendation for the housing supply crisis. Bradley, what is your Darryl's idea is robots. He feels that if we get enough robots building enough prefab and using leveraging technology to build, that'll help us grow the amount of supply. What about you?
How are we going to address supply?
Mm-hmm.
I think to just address supply misses half the equation. I think we need to be balancing out demand as well. So first of all, I think the pressure point that the government and organizations are putting on is adding additional demand. So if we were concerned, so I'm not concerned about prices going crazy and going high. It doesn't bother me. I'm making money. But if our honest concern is we want to reduce the price appreciation, if that's the plan, I think the fastest you're going to do that is reducing demand, because we've seen that the demand shift is what's kind of messed up what's created the supply. We say it's a supply issue, but is it all of a sudden a supply issue in the outskirt communities, in the suburbs? No, I think the demand has exposed the supply thing. So if
Mm-hmm.
supply was in fact the issue, then speeding up, the fast way to do it is to speed up development times, because a typical condo can cost $100,000 in the city of Toronto. And I think the city is doing a lot of good things. You know, they're opening up this idea of the yellow belt. They're doing what they can, but until people are comfortable with living in a 3-bedroom condo in the city, there's not much you can do. So I think it's a balanced equation. I don't think there's a one size fits all. I think we need to be equally focused on addressing the demand if in fact our concern was prices. But I don't think we're going to be able to accomplish that.
And the concern, no, exactly. But the concern is, and you sort of articulated this earlier, is for everybody to have a roof over their head. That is the goal.
I mean, I would, as an investor, whether Toronto is the highest price point city in North America, to me, I have a neck in the game. Like, it matters that I make money, but what matters more to me is that Toronto continues to be a city that people have a place to live, and that, like, you know, is inclusive in that way. I think we're doing good things. Like, really in our last podcast, we talked about this. I think the big solution to supply affordability for homelessness and people on the lower end that we often ignored or just kind of overlooked is we need support from the province and the feds. It can't come from the city. The city is not equipped, as we've seen since the 90s. They're not equipped to deal with it themselves. So, and now what we have seen is there's a RHI, the Regional Housing Initiative or whatever, that was announced by the federal government. This is a good thing. And I think we need to keep that going. Cost, to me, that cost is worth it. To some people, it might not be, because if you know, do you want that spread between the wealthy and the poor, or do you want more of a balanced approach? I think Canada's success has lied in trying to maintain a middle class, and that's why I tend to lean to that side. Which I have a lot of listeners that are very pro business, very conservative, that would disagree with that, and that's fine too. But that's my take on it.
Nice. Well, we appreciate you coming on the show today, Bradley. This has been great, and a nice conversation where Darryl and I aren't yelling at each other for once, so that's good. We kind of agreed on everything today, Darryl. That's a change. Almost everything. Don't say anything, Darryl. We could ruin this streak, okay? But yeah, Bradley, great points, great show. Check out Watson Estates. Anybody who's listening to our show and not his, you're missing out. Watson Estates is on YouTube and Spotify and all the other podcasts.
You can find us. It's called Toronto's #1 real estate podcast.
Search that term and you're going to find him. That's it.
You'll see my face. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Bradley. Good to meet you. It was nice having a new opinion.
Absolutely.
New perspective. Yeah, it was great. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for your
Beautiful.
time. Really appreciate you coming. Everybody else, subscribe for our channel too, please, if you're still here listening to this at the hour and 3-minute mark. Have a great day, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. TK.
Thanks, guys. All right. Look forward to doing this again in the future.